In this presentation, I would like to take a look at the piston and rod removal from your Honda GC series engine. So as usual, let's take a look at some expectations for this lab. First and foremost, your connecting rod and connecting rod cap must be indexed to each other should the rod cap get separated and confused with somebody else's. That's very important, especially on a multi-cylinder engine like the V-twins, the more advanced engine that we'll take a look at as well this year, and when you're working in a group setting like most of us are here in the classroom and the shop. If your piston becomes stuck, okay, let's say you're removing your piston and it, tilts a little bit and gets stuck in the cylinder. Please simply stop. Bring your engine up to me, and I have a few tricks that I will exercise on it to remedy that situation. It gets increasingly more difficult if you wrench on that piston. It becomes very, very stuck, to the point where usually we end up replacing the piston because removing it actually breaks the ring lands. It gets stuck in there so bad. So definitely be mindful as far as that's concerned. If you think it's getting stuck, stop what you're doing and bring it up to my table so we can take a look at it. While I will show you this procedure in video for your reference, it is not something that I expect for you to do, and that would be the following items. Do not remove your piston rings. I will show you how to do that, but I do not expect for you to remove those on your personal engine here. So if you're doing one for a customer, it's a little bit of a different story. Obviously, we would re-ring that, but it's not necessary to do that here in the classroom. Do not remove the piston from the connecting rod. Obviously, if we're replacing the piston, that's something that you need to take care of. But since we're not replacing that, we don't want to have the piston get installed upside down or anything like that. Again, I'll show you how to do that in this video, but I don't expect for you to do that in the classroom setting. Do not interchange your piston, which means your piston and rod assembly, with your neighbor. Again, that crankshaft, the big end journal on that, the throw, if you will, is matched to your connecting rod. Your crankshaft might be a little bit out of spec, and your connecting rod is probably designed to match that slightly out of spec tolerance, if you will, that Honda has. So the tolerance on that would probably be correct. In fact, it usually is, but only if you're using the rod that came with that crankshaft. So we talked about that a little bit in a previous presentation, that we'll take an out-of-spec connecting rod and we'll put it with an out-of-spec crankshaft, and we end up with the correct tolerance one way or the other when Honda assembles the engine. When you have thousands of these parts to mix and match and come up with the best combinations, it's very easy. When you have 75 of these engines apart and you only have 75 parts to pick from, the variation in the tolerance can actually be quite extreme when you're not putting matched parts with other matched parts. So definitely keep that in mind. Whatever you need to do to keep your parts organized will probably work best. Lastly, before we begin this lab, realize at the end when the service is complete, there is an instructor check, which is me inspecting your parts and giving you credit for the work which you have done. Let's go ahead and jump into the engine. All right, so we talked earlier about the index on the connecting rod. We've taken care of that. We've made sure our rod cap is installed and our 2 bolts are installed. I went ahead and ran those down. I didn't tighten them, but that way everything stays complete. If you attempt to remove this connecting rod without the cap, don't ask me how, there's about a 90% chance the piston's gonna get stuck in the cylinder. So all we're gonna do is we're simply gonna pull the piston out to the end, and we're gonna wiggle up and down very gently with a little bit of tension pulling, and that usually prevents everything from getting stuck. So you saw how that worked, super easy. If you do it that way, I'll bet you're not going to have any problems with removing the piston from the engine. This has been a look at how to remove the piston and rod assembly from your Honda GC series engine and some service precautions that you need to observe.